Well, welcome once again, everyone. I forgot what number this is in the series, but this is our next presentation on the Archetypical Mind. Today we're introducing the Significator Category, and we're going to begin by reviewing the Experience Category and give you a little background of where we are, because there was some time lapse in between our presentations. Briefly stated, the Archetypical Mind is a design of how we process a thought. Our archetypical mind is pervasive throughout a solar system. So all of the experiences, third, fourth, or fifth density within the solar system uses the same archetypical mind. The archetypical mind does not change as we move through the experiential densities. What does change is our consciousness level, our mind, body, spirit. And so it appears that the individual archetypes of the archetypical mind change, but it appears to change because we are better able or more able to perceive the degree of truth in each archetype. Every archetype, there are 22 archetypes that are in the design of our archetypical mind. There are 7 for the mind, 7 for the body, and 7 for the spirit, and the 22nd is free will. Free will is a part of every other archetype within the system. So there's essentially, you can think of it as 21 functional archetypes that guide the mind, and then free will is the 22nd that participates in all of the 21 archetypes. We begin with the matrix of the mind, body, and spirit, and the potentiator of the mind, body, and spirit. And both the matrix and the potentiator works together as essentially two parts of the same process. The matrix and the potentiator prepare the mind, body, spirit to process the thought. The matrix and potentiator is what actually reflects the changes from the previous thought. Every time we process a thought, and we can only process one thought at a time, when we finish the process of that thought, the fruit of that process is added back to the mind, body, spirit. The mind, body, spirit at that point is changed. And so the entire experience of creation changes as a result of that one mind, body, spirit being changed. And then a new thought is attracted based upon the modifications made to the mind, body, spirit, the changes in vibrational resonance, and that next thought is processed. And that's why we have the experience of time, because we process one thought at a time. And so we move incrementally in one direction as we're processing thoughts through what we perceive to be time. Now, in order for the archetypical mind to be functional, we have created for us, as part of every thought, an environment. And that environment is complete. Every thought includes the environment, everything from the octave to the universe, to the galaxy, to the solar system, to the planet, and to the intricacies of the planet that we experience, all the way down to the lounge chair in front of the TV in our den that we are sitting and watching this video. That is the culmination of the environment of all that has gone before, but every thought is complete and includes all of those refinements of environment down to where we are, or where we perceive ourselves to be. What we are experiencing is a film, is time. Time is a series of experiences, most of which are planned for us. All the major ones are planned for us. A very small portion, between 20 and 30%, we participate in the choosing of those experiences depending on what our vibration is. If we are in chaos, then we attract more chaos and experience more pain and suffering. If we have reached a level of stability and a higher consciousness level within the third density experience, then we experience more stability and more happiness in the portion of the experiences that we are creating, that we are choosing, the portions of time that we are choosing. And in the archetypical mind, the matrix and the potentiator prepare us for the processing of a thought. They prepare a mind, body, spirit for the processing of a thought. And then we enter the three archetypes that actually do the processing. The first of those is the catalyst. The second of those is the experience category, and the third is the significator category. The catalyst category essentially gives us the kinetic portion of time, the actual, it's defined as pain and suffering. It's the actual event that we choose to experience. So, say hypothetically, it's in your timeline, or you choose to experience a car wreck. The actual impact of the car, the actual wreck itself, is the catalyst. Now, that has no emotion on it whatsoever. It is up to us to apply the appropriate emotion, and by appropriate, I mean what we interpret that experience to be. And we do that with the experience of the mind. All thought goes from mind to mind to mind category. So the thought in all of the archetypical categories proceeds up the mind. And the mind, again, is a creation of the spirit, and the body is a creation of the mind. The mind is our ego. It is our perception of separation from the Creator. And so the mind is the decider of how we're going to interpret each of these categories that we experience in the archetypical mind as we process a single thought. The experience of the mind, we begin with ta, which is separation, it's perception of separation. It is a distortion, and that is the initial object. When we begin to participate in third density, our consciousness is very low. And so the archetypes of the archetypical mind appear to transform as our consciousness level changes. So initially we begin with the perception of separation. We begin as a distortion in the experience of the mind. As we raise our consciousness through having experiences, as we surrender our perception of separation, as we learn to surrender our ego, then the object and the initial subject, which in this case is law or wisdom, transform. When we reach that break point of awakening, which is about 285 on the Hawkins scale of human consciousness, the perception of separation loses its hold upon us, and we begin to function from a level of wisdom. Now, this is transitional, so it doesn't mean that one day we're in separation and the next day we're in wisdom. It is a process of transformation. It's not transcendence, it's transformation. And anywhere that you see the object beginning as a distortion, for example, in experience, the initial experience of the mind, the initial object is separation or ta. In the body, the initial archetype is ta, which again is separation. And in spirit, it is da. So in the experience category, we are looking to transform that entire functioning of the experience category from a distortion to an inherent characteristic. In the significator, for example, both the object and the subject are inherent characteristics. They are not distortions of the Creator. So you will not see a flipping. You won't see a transformation of the object and the subject, where you have two inherent characteristics in each category, each archetype in a category, you see an integration. So you begin to blend, for example, in the significator of the mind, the initial object is Ra, which is love, and the initial subject is law, which is wisdom. So you see, you will see as consciousness rises, an increased awareness and submission to wisdom as a contributing factor to love, so the two become integrated. The purpose of the archetypical mind, the purpose of our mind, body, spirit, is to explore a portion of the Creator.
So at the experience level, the object and subject are going to transform or flip.
That's right.
But at the significator level, they will integrate.
That's right.
Okay, just making sure.
Anywhere that you see an inherent characteristic in both the object and the subject, they will integrate. Anywhere that you see beginning a distortion and the subject being an inherent characteristic, they will transform.
Say the second part again.
Whenever you see an archetype that begins as a distortion,
Okay.
and has an inherent characteristic as the subject, will transform as our consciousness rises.
Okay, so it's a transformation.
And that is, and there's a caveat to that. The matrix of the spirit has a distortion for both the object and the subject. If you remember, that is the alpha of our archetypical mind. And that does not within itself integrate, nor does it transform. That, the matrix of the spirit, integrates with the matrix of the great way, which is the top layer of the whole archetypical mind. And that is the omega. So the alpha and the omega of the spirit are our beginning and ending. We begin in absolute chaos, we end in absolute stability. And so those two archetypes at the extreme of the archetypical mind integrate and transform.
Okay. All right. So the terminology of it being a condition versus an algorithm. So in the body significator, you're dealing with two inherent characteristics. So they're going to integrate, but it's a condition to overcome. And through that, and you're going to integrate it in order to overcome it.
Yes, but look, as you see, a condition is just that. It is a condition that is created for us to facilitate our third density experience. And in order to graduate to the next level of consciousness, it is incumbent upon us to overcome those conditions, which is what happens when we integrate and or transform the archetypes, so the object and subject. For example, in the experience of the mind is where we apply an emotion. We experience a catalyst, and we used as the example a car wreck. The actual moment of impact, we will apply an emotion to that and interpret that. Now, while we remain in low consciousness, we can pretty well assume that the emotion that we're going to apply to that is going to be a low vibrating emotion. Now, that does not mean that we only experienced or we only created a low vibrating emotion, to say hypothetically fear. We interpret that car wreck with an emotion of fear. With that is the antithesis. So with that emotion of fear, we also created, say, joy. Just throwing out an opposite. But we only recognized fear, the low emotion, which means that we did not fully process that catalyst. Okay, we only recognized half of the emotion that was created.
Because we didn't recognize the full algorithm.
We didn't balance it.
Right.
It's unbalanced, and we will store that experience and that emotion as emotional baggage within our energy system.
Right, but what I meant was, like, when you're dealing with an algorithm, you're dealing with a combination of things to create a final situation, like so because you're not, there isn't the balance, you aren't, in this case, since you're not transforming at that point, it's like you haven't gotten the complete sum of it.
Right, but an algorithm is a piece of the puzzle that assists us in raising our consciousness in the transformation. A condition is something to be overcome, but an algorithm is part of the puzzle. It leads us to wisdom, and the wisdom assists us in transforming.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, it's
So,
almost like it equals wisdom, and therefore once you fully understand that, you transform.
right. Exactly. When you begin to experience from a perspective of wisdom, then you're no longer creating imbalances by your application of emotions within, the catalyst process.
Yeah, for some reason I think this is, we may have talked about it before, but this just seems so much more distinct this time about the distinction in just the integration versus the transformation. Because we talk about condition and algorithm, but I don't remember you discussing this top section before where you talked about if it's two creator characteristics, it's an integration, and if it's a distortion and whatever, it's a transformation. So maybe
Yeah.
just
Well, that's why we're reviewing it.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. So the mind is the decider, and what the mind does with the processing of every thought with every category is it receives the input from the catalyst, which is in our example is going to be the car wreck. Now before that, the mind, body, spirit has already been prepared. If our mind, body, spirit still remains in low consciousness, then we're still going to be dealing with unconsciousness. We're still not going to be able to access awareness, very simply put. So depending, again, on where we are in our own consciousness evolution will determine what role the archetypical categories play in our ability to interpret and experience the thoughts that we've attracted. And if we're in low consciousness, then it's most probable that we're going to apply a low vibrating emotion like fear and log this as an incomplete experience. But before we do that, we are going, the experience of the mind is going to poll the experience of the body. The experience of the body has no intelligence, which means it is going to be reactive. Now the catalyst of the body is where we choose or we determine what sensory data input is available. We don't choose it in the catalyst of the body. We determine that the lighting was a certain way, the noises were a certain way, there were certain sounds, there were certain smells. That's what the catalyst of the body does. It determines what sensory data input is available to us. And that coincides with the actual experience of the wreck, of the catalyst. But then again, that's absolutely neutral. It has no value because we've not assigned a value either to the sensory data input or to the experience of car wreck itself. In the experience, the middle level of the interpretation of a thought, of an actual experience of the mind, we will apply the emotion, but not until we have actually chosen and felt the sensory data input. Now, this is,
So we don't apply an emotion until the sensory input is chosen?
mhm. For example, if you're walking down a country road, and it's a beautiful day in the fall, the leaves are crisp, and it's a very potentially pleasant experience. If that's the extent of your experience, then that physical input will support your vibration level and your mental or your mental decisions about that. But in that same physical world experience, if all of a sudden a bear appears and starts chasing you and changes the whole context of your experience of that physical sensory input, then it contributes same physical or sensory data input, exactly the same sensory data input, but your interpretation is going to be entirely different.
Or how is it the same? In the first one, there's no bear, and the second one, there is a bear.
Yeah, that's right. But remember, the emotion is in your mind.
Well, that's true.
The emotion is your mind. So this sensory data input is not determining the emotion that you're applying, but it will support the emotion that you're supplying. So if you supply fear, then this sensory data input will be interpreted by you to support fear.
I kind of get it, but I don't.
Okay? If you,
It still seems like the bear makes a big difference.
the bear makes a huge difference. Yes, it does. But the reason that it makes a difference is because you change how you're interpreting that sensory data input in support of the experience. The lighting of the day, the sounds of the day, the crispness of the leaves and the temperature and all of that is exactly the same. But once you have, say the bear is traumatic, you actually form a trauma. Once you form a trauma as a result of the bear appearing in that sensory data input, then you will log that sensory data input as supporting memory information to the trauma. So the likelihood is in the future, say 20 years in the future, you say you survived the bear, you outran the bear. In 20 years in the future, when you trigger enough of those sensory data inputs that are similar to your experience in the woods with a bear, you will experience fear. No bear, but because you've recorded and associated fear with that sensory data input.
For so long. Okay.
Yeah, because if it had been a butterfly that showed up, you probably would have just gone on with your lovely
Right.
day without that
Yeah,
catalyst.
it would have added to the positive nature of your recording of that information.
Okay, I think I get it. It's which came first that I don't know, that's confusing me.
Okay, which came first? Well, you're dealing with time, and so you're processing a series of thoughts in sequence. Okay, so it's not a matter of you walking in the woods and then a bear shows up, and then after the bear shows up, and interpreting that all as one experience. We do, but what is actually happening is you're taking, one step in the woods, and that's one thought, and you're taking another step in the woods, that's another thought, and then the bear shows up. So individual thoughts don't cover the whole scenario that we're talking about.
Okay.
Well, and plus biases and prejudices play a big role in that, because if you've already determined
Well, that's where,
presupposed thought on the bear, then that's why you're reacting that way.
that's the next thought on the thought processing scenario.
Because bears don't have to be scary.
Well, I was trying to, for 99 out of 100 people,
No,
a
I
bear
just
chasing you in
meant
the woods is
in
going to be
conjunction
scary.
with how it changes the sensory input.
The
If you
sensory
get-
data input, though, the point is that that's absolutely the same. It doesn't change. It's the same day. It's the same
that-
sensory input.
That's where I'm getting confused, because I would think that the sensory input does change, because in one, there is no bear, and the other, there is a bear.
The
What-
catalyst changes.
Yeah, what
Uh.
smell has changed? What against your skin has changed? Has the temperature changed?
Uh.
I mean,
Okay.
visually, you're getting a visual, you know.
That's catalyst.
Oh, so that bear
That's
is really
catalyst.
stinky.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
not the sensory data input. If the bear catches you and is chomping on you, then that would change the sensory data input.
Okay, gotcha.
It was trying to play with you. Come down, let's go play.
So again, while we remain in low consciousness, we're only dealing with input from the body and the mind's decision. The mind has intelligence. The body has no intelligence that it's contributing. But what the body contributes will be interpreted as either supporting or contrary to the mind's decision of how to interpret that catalyst. When we raise our consciousness below or above 285 on the Hawkins scale, and we have opened our heart chakra, when we have opened our spirit portion, what is actually happening is the mind, whether we're in low consciousness or high consciousness, the mind is polling the body and it's also polling the spirit in sequence. While we remain in low consciousness, below 285, and are dealing only with the mind and the body, the spirit input is ignored. It's responding, but there's nobody home to receive it. And the reason for that is the potentiator of the mind is unconscious. There's no one there to receive the input from the spirit. Above 285, when we have opened the spirit, the same scenario that was interpreted just with the mind and the body is also available to receive input from the experience, because we are aware enough that we see that we're getting input, and we allow that to be part of the decision-making process. The decision is still the mind, but the mind has greater depth of understanding. It has greater access to truth. And the experience of the spirit is the surrender of our ego. And with the surrender of our ego, we began in innocence, which is the matrix of the spirit. We've received light or information in the potentiator of the spirit. The catalyst is faith or hope. So we keep, with every, once we open the spirit category, with every thought, we are reducing our innocence, we are receiving information in the form of light, we are building confidence because we know more, we have more awareness and information about actually what is happening, and so we allow ourselves to develop faith in the unknown, because it's all unknown. And once we apply that decision of relying on faith or not relying on faith, which is the transitional process. You remember we've talked about life being in 3 stages. First stage is we experience what we don't like. Well, in that phase, all that we are able to process thoughts with are the mind and body. And then we open the spirit portion of our being, we open our heart chakra, and we begin to allow the contributions of the spirit. So we begin getting light, information. We begin having the choice of whether to rely on faith or reject that faith and that light and only deal again with the mind. So we enter that transitional stage between experiencing what we don't like and sometimes choosing what we like, sometimes what we don't like, that transformational stage, until we get to the point where we experience only what we like. We do that by surrendering the ego. We surrender the ego because we've had sufficient light information. We've developed our reliance upon faith and our willingness to let it go. And that's where your mantra becomes very profound.
What
Okay.
mantra is that?
Does it make sense?
I don't think he wants to say that on the video.
I don't know, we don't need to document it.
No.
So that's through the experience. So as you see, as we reach higher levels of consciousness, and this only accelerates as we move into fourth density and fifth density. We have transformed in fourth density, we've transformed the subject and object, so we're now working with wisdom, we're working with awareness, and we're working with wisdom in the mind. So the distortions have been surrendered, and so the conditions fade away. So this is the experience of the body is the primary catalyst for our continued attachment to the physical. Our preoccupation with competition, our preoccupation with making more money. We surrender that because that's all ego reinforcing. That is the essence of the teachings of all of our greatest spiritual leaders. Surrendering our attachment to the ego. This literally, the experience of the body literally creates our perception of physicality. And that is a major hindrance in our ability to be able to visualize what creation is really about, because we are so closely attached, so adamantly attached to the physical. The experience of the mind is male energy, which means it perceives itself as farther away from the Creator than female. This is actually where we apply the emotion to the catalyst. The experience of the body is female, so it actually, and it is a condition, so it's something to be overcome. Our perception of physicality is something to be overcome. We lose our attachment to physicality as we raise our consciousness within third density, and as we enter into fourth density, then this transforms. Our consciousness level is sufficiently high that we don't need somebody to do everything for us. What this requires, this archetype requires, is that time that we experience includes everything. We do not have the consciousness in order to create what we perceive that we are creating.
Say that again.
Okay. We perceive that we are going about our day and choosing what we're doing. That we're moving, that we are creating physicality. We perceive that we're doing that. We don't have the consciousness level to do that. All that we have the consciousness level to do is to allow the film of time to run through us and apply the emotions to the experiences that are presented to us.
Okay, so does that mean we are not capable of manifesting anything?
Essentially,
So
Well,
it's just happening.
it's just happening.
Or when we think we're manifesting something, or we're attempting to manifest something and then it happens, what is that?
Our higher self is saying, here, little one.
This is what you need to do.
Well, your choice of a timeline is something you've worked out with your higher self.
Right,
And there are opportunities for improvisation on that
right,
timeline in the form of time dots.
right.
Okay? But as far as manifesting, we don't manifest. We manifest through our higher self. So the more confining we are in our expectations or our requests from our higher self, the more limited the results are going to be. In other words, if we surrender our ego, rely on faith, if you say, just hypothetically, I want a house. Well, if you say, I want a nice 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, and that's probably what you're going to get. But your higher self has a much more grandiose perception than you do. So you may end up with a 5-bedroom house.
So in other words, don't be specific.
Don't be too specific. Yes, specific. Don't be too specific, exactly. Your higher self,
That's so funny, because all the creative visualization things are always like,
Be very
Limited.
specific, yeah.
limited.
Even with prayer, they say be very specific. Okay, I have another question. I'm just full of questions today, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
Okay, and this is quite personal, and we all know that I'm very attached to the physical. But yet, alright, I guess my difficulty is that I am striving so much to rely more on the spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm letting go more, but I'm still just so attached to the physical.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
A large part of that is because of the emotional baggage that you still carry.
Okay.
Okay? And the way this works is this is where we apply the emotion. This after we've gotten the input wherever we are in our evolutionary process. If we're getting either input just from the body or input from the body and the spirit, that concludes the processing of the thought at this level. Okay? And then this is handed off to the significator of the mind. In the significator of the mind, it is an algorithm and a condition. It is both, depending on where we are in our evolutionary process. If we are in low consciousness below the 285, the significator of the mind is going to serve as a condition. It is our biases and prejudices, which are formed as a result of the emotions that we've used to choose our interpretation of catalysts.
Okay, so the biases and prejudices
Our beliefs.
are I'm sorry, I'm really trying to keep up. So you said below 285
Mm-hmm.
is when we make it a condition,
Right.
and above 285 would make it an algorithm.
That's right. Exactly. Our awareness has expanded, our ability to perceive things without the attachment to the physical. We have faith. We've surrendered the ego to a large degree. But our beliefs that we, below 285, adhere to so vehemently lose their meaning.
Aha. Okay.
Let me ask you a sort of a dumb question, and the reason I know it's dumb, so I'm just going to ask it anyway. But you know how you were talking about when you get up, say you get up and you leave here, and you go to the store, you go home, you go to a friend's house, all these different things that you're doing. We're assuming that we're making those choices, and you're saying you're not really making those choices because you don't have the consciousness level to do that. You're just picking I guess picking your how you're applying things, your emotions and all that. So if I left here and I went home and I went into my room and I sat in my closet and I didn't do anything else except eat and sleep, what is that? I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's if
You're sitting and eating and sleeping in your closet.
like if I'm not making the choice to go home and sit in my closet and do nothing but eat and sleep and go to the restroom, because that would be gross. What am I doing? Like if I'm not making that choice, what am I doing?
Well, there's one of two possibilities that is happening. Number one possibility is that's part of your timeline.
Okay.
That you will experience that as part of your timeline.
Because people do that if they have fear, like phobias and things like that. They'll go and they'll stay somewhere. But that's not
Well,
really
the more likely situation than something that unproductive is that they are deviating from their timeline. That they are resisting that.
because they're afraid, or they have fear, baggage, or whatever.
And so they're experiencing greater pain and suffering.
And then
And that pain and suffering will continue until they acquiesce and start submitting their ego to the path, to the timeline.
Well, and you were saying that it's as if the higher self is saying, here, little one. What are they saying? Here, little one, this is what you asked for? Or what are they saying?
This is what you,
This is where you're supposed to, what you're supposed to do.
well, that's part of
next.
your improvisation. You know, that you want certain things. And as long as your higher self literally makes the decision, is this going to be supportive of you accomplishing your life goals that are part of your timeline?
So does that mean your little one, or the higher self is saying, here, little one, this will be supportive?
No. That your higher self will not live your life for you. They will not make your decisions.
Okay. Well,
They will support your decisions even if your decisions are harmful to your goal.
all right, well, you just started the sentence and you left the sentence wide open for my imagination to go all over the place. So what is the higher self saying? Here, little one, what?
Here is the fulfillment of your law of attraction desire.
It just seems to me that where law of attraction comes in here is that our mind-body-spirit complex is, as we're processing thoughts, it's making a different beautiful pattern all the time. It's almost like a pattern. It's a configuration.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what attracts experiences into our life for us. And so there is a law of attraction in that way. We're not consciously choosing it because we don't have the consciousness for it. But the law of attraction is, however, that configuration of our mind, body, spirit, it is attracting exactly what is needed for us to grow and to process the next thought, to elevate and reconfigure in a more, I don't want to say higher way, but for our consciousness.
So like what we were talking about earlier, in a way, that we're exactly where we're supposed to be. The law of attraction is bringing us stuff that's helping us to experience what we need to experience to be exactly where we're supposed to be.
Exactly.
And to grow the way we're supposed to
Exactly.
grow.
So even though it doesn't look like it's a great experience, it's exactly that if you're having the experience, it's the experience that you are needing to have, and you're
in order
attracting
to
that,
trigger something, whether it's good or bad.
whether we see it as good or bad.
Right.
You know, but it's excavating. It's like a valve. It's excavating whatever needs to be brought up to the surface so that we can apply awareness to it, and it can and we can process it, gain light, and it reconfigures our mind, body, spirit complex. So that's where the law of attraction comes in. So we think that we're attracting things, but what it is really the greater part of us beyond our our very narrow limits of awareness is actually attracting it.
The law of attraction is often misconstrued to the standpoint they promote. It's a very nice marketing package, and the law of attraction promotes the idea that if you just desire something, you decide that what you want, and you believe you can have it, then you have to allow it to come in. Well, that's a gross summary of a very complex situation. It's assuming first that you know what you want. In order to know what you want, really know what you want, you have to have cleared all of your emotional baggage. You will have to have done away with your biases and prejudice and raised your consciousness level to the highest it can be within our density. That's in order for you to know what you want. And then believing you can have it is no problem, because you don't have any of the obstructions. You're essentially living in your spirit and you're appreciating what is happening, so you really don't want anything. You don't need anything. And allow it, well, hell, you've already got it.
Right.
You are it. I mean,
You're it.
You're, yeah.
Well, okay. I'm sorry. Like she said about the closet thing, I sometimes wonder, why am I doing what I'm even doing? Because I'll just be doing something, and yeah, I like it, but, and I guess that's why I'm doing it, because I like it.
That's why you should do it. That is the primary determinant of what we should do and not do.
But then at the same time, in trying to make choices, like, we'll just say professional choices. Do I do this? Do I do that? I mean, do we just, and we don't know if we like it yet because we haven't done it yet.
You allow.
You allow.
You stay in the moment, you allow. What is presented to you is what you are to experience.
Okay, but what if
Ram Dass explains it just like that. Being in the now is allowing what is supposed to happen. Whatever you're experiencing, whether you perceive it to be good or bad, is reality. That is what you are supposed to experience.
Okay, but does that mean I bounce from job to job to job, as someone says? I mean,
Yeah.
because I've actually had this experience where it keeps coming back to me. I finally give in and I finally say yes and I do it. Yeah, I enjoy it, but then it kind of goes on a hiatus, and then I get presented with this other opportunity. I'm like, oh, well, that sounds like that should be fun, but what if I should go back to this one that's not really complete yet?
Then you're not surrendering your ego, and you're trying to micromanage what is being presented to you.
Well, that's what.
Because you have a preconceived bias and prejudice of how things are supposed to be.
There's a story of I'm jumping from job to job and what that means.
Well, no, I'm just wondering. If
Well,
that's-
whatever's happening is what is happening for you. That's the wonderful beauty of how the universal law of attraction.
But what I mean is,
really
what
works.
if everybody is just, I mean, because it's not like I sought out either of these positions. They're
Okay.
just kind of coming to me.
Okay?
Mhm.
So, does that mean I move to the next one because the last one is no longer really completely coming
Which
to
do
me?
you prefer?
Right.
What does your heart say?
It's very confused.
Okay? Well, you need to clarify your heart, and which feels right.
Yeah. Inquire into the thoughts you have around it. Well, if I jump from job to job, what does that mean?
Well, I'm not even
If I go
concerned.
jump-
Yeah, ironically, I'm not even
Yeah.
concerned about that.
Well, whatever the
Well,
thoughts, because that's the only reason that obscures what we really want anyway, is the stories. Otherwise, our heart would be crystal clear. We would know exactly how to follow. We only get confused when we're, like A Course in Miracles says, you're serving two masters, the ego and the spirit. That's when there's confusion. So if you can look at the stories that are supporting the ego, that helps you to get clear on what you really want.
Which is the real value of the Byron-Katie process, to help you determine what is the reality as opposed to your story.
Okay.
Okay?
I think so. For now.
Okay. The significator,
Do you think this condition will come back without your permission?
probably. The significator is the last category that we will use while we remain in third density. The thought will continue to be processed into the transformation and the great way category, which are the two categories above this. But the transformation category is really intended for fourth density. And the thought will continue to process, but it really will have no effect because we can't recognize those higher two levels. So the significator category is the end of the thought process for all intent and purposes in third density.
What about wanderers?
They're in third density. They're
Okay.
having a third
Okay,
density
just making
experience unless their consciousness rises to a fourth density level.
Just making sure, because I was wondering about, well, like Jesus and Buddha and.
Their consciousness level exceeded third density capacity.
Okay.
So yes, they were working with transformation and great way.
If
Okay.
your bones start feeling like they're breaking and you're bleeding blood.
Then you can worry about that, but right now, the significator is the end of the process. It's also the end of the experience part of the archetypical mind. And what happens is after we've done the processing and the experience level and we've received input from the body and made our choice, or the body and the spirit and made our choice, depending on where our consciousness level is. The thought is then presented to the significator of the mind. All of the objects of the significator are raw or love as the initial object. In the significator of the mind, wisdom, law, is the subject. So raw and law, love and wisdom will integrate as our consciousness rises.
Because wisdom is the fourth density.
Well, that's what we do in fourth density, but we
Right.
still experience wisdom here. Now remember, what we're doing is raising our consciousness in third density sufficiently to open the spirit, which means that we at that point begin to become awareness. If we are only third chakra and our spirit is not open yet, then we can have awareness, but we cannot be awareness. So we become awareness as our fourth chakra opens, as our spirit opens, we access our spirit. And as we become awareness, then we are learning of the inherent characteristics from the perspective of awareness. Which means that we are learning of wisdom from the perspective of awareness. We are learning of love from the perspective of awareness.
Okay.
So, raw and law are the object and subject of the significator of the mind. This is, in lower consciousness, a condition. It is our biases and prejudices. And if you think about it, we've had an emotion we've had a catalyst, we've applied an emotion to it, and based upon our interpretation of the emotion on that catalyst, we form biases and prejudices. Every time I walk in the woods, a bear chases me. Well, your bias is that, well, if I walk in the woods, a bear's going to chase me.
Okay.
So this essentially is a product of the emotions that we've applied to the catalyst. While we remain in low consciousness, the sensory data input supports that. And we're dealing only with these two categories. As we surrender the ego, then we heal. That's what we do with the emotion processing. We are healing the emotional baggage. And then we have, after we heal all the emotional baggage, we have to go in and do the same assessment with biases and prejudices. And dissipate the biases and prejudices. But we no longer, at that point, as we raise our consciousness, we no longer have that emotional baggage triggering the supporting conditions for those biases and prejudices. But we still have to become aware of them and let them go. These are our beliefs. You know, we believe, you know, in a religion. We adhere to the content of that religion. Well, that's a dogma, and that falls under our beliefs because something in our past has allowed us to develop those biases and prejudices to support that belief system. While we maintain biases and prejudices, we are unable to be open and vulnerable because we're predisposed towards how we're going to do with that. While we maintain these biases and prejudices and these beliefs, we are still reacting to the catalyst. Even though we may have cleared the emotional baggage, we're still reacting to catalysts instead of responding to catalysts. So this is where it's imperative that we learn to watch our thoughts and be aware of our thoughts. Here, until we clear the emotional baggage, we learn to be aware of our emotions and feel our emotions and use the emotions as our trigger. Well, I'm feeling fear, so I've got fear inside of me, I need to heal that. Or I've got heartache, so I've got heartache inside of me, I need to heal that and release that. After we do that, then we become aware of our thoughts. And it can be simultaneous. You can't say, well, I'm not going to watch my thoughts, only my emotions. They kind of go hand in glove. And then you become, when you become aware of that and release those biases and prejudices, then you become open and vulnerable. You surrender the ego even more significantly. And are not hindered by the need to defend or protect your ego in any way.
You stop believing the mind.
That's right.
I mean, eventually you just come to stop taking the mind seriously.
Well, what you do is, the mind is a creation of spirit, It has its own intelligence, but this is the greater intelligence. So you've developed your confidence in your faith and surrendered your ego, and so you just live in the moment. When you live in the moment, what comes to you is what you're supposed to have. That's your experience you're supposed to have.
Okay, well, that kind of answers my professional question.
Okay?
I mean, what I was asking before, in that one continued to come to me, and I remembered what you had said one Friday night, that if opportunities are never lost, but that is they continue to, if it's meant to be, it keeps coming to you. And then it kind of was what it was and went by the wayside and is on hiatus, and another opportunity has arisen.
Well, your higher self is very fleet of foot, and when you miss one, then they run out in front of you again, and they set up the little sign again, and if you miss that one, then they'll pick it up and run down the road a little more. Till finally they'll put a tree limb that you'll bang your head on and look down at the sign. Oh, okay, where'd this come from?
Okay. Yeah, I definitely need those tree limbs.
As your consciousness rises, then this becomes an algorithm because it becomes supportive with love and wisdom to your further advancement of your consciousness, further surrender of your ego, furthering your ability to live in the moment. The body at this point is raw in unity, love and unity. It is a condition. Literally, in this archetype is where we choose either to be sick or well. That is what this does. So if we're interpreting with low consciousness emotions, and we're creating biases and prejudices, and just say, I don't know, we were using car wreck. I've injured my neck in this car wreck. And it's an actual injury, but we decide to perpetuate that because this supports the bias and prejudice. And if you remember, this is reshaping our mind, body, spirit. After we finish the processing of this thought, it reshapes our mind, body, spirit. So if we make the decision that after this car wreck, I'm going to have a neck injury, for example, that becomes part of the modification of our mind, body, spirit. Every additional thought after that point will include, as the mind, body, spirit is shaped, the condition that you're ill, that you have a neck injury.
Okay, is that why some people can have a neck injury and it bothers them for life, and
Yep.
others can have a neck injury and then they're like, okay, I'm going to
That's
physical
exactly
therapy, I'm going to do this, that, and the other, and it's not
You're done
going to
with it.
inhibit me in any way, shape, or form. Okay.
Yeah, there is a period where you heal the physical,
Right.
but you don't have to incorporate it into your mind, body, spirit so that you prejudge every thought. Remember, the thought is inclusive of the entirety of the environment
Right.
and the catalyst. So what you've done is you've conditioned the mind, body, spirit to have a neck injury. So regardless of the thought, whatever thought you attract is also going to be supportive of that because it's going to resonate with your vibrational level.
Okay, here's a question along those lines. Specifically, I was in a car accident and injured my knee. Well, I went ahead and did everything I was supposed to, continued to do, did not have it prohibit me. Then many years later, had another accident to the same knee. But did the same thing and did everything I was supposed to do and do not allow it to prohibit me. But is there a correlation with why it was the same knee?
I would guess that it was, yeah. I would guess that was supposed to be a catalyst for you to learn certain things. You'll have to determine what they are.
Okay.
But usually someone who is accident prone, for example, is accident prone for a reason because of lack of awareness, and they will have the same type of accident over and over and over because they condition their mind, body, spirit to attract that type or that sort of experience.
But they conditioned it because they believed a thought.
They've created a bias or a prejudice.
So the biases and prejudices condition. It's interesting that it would condition, well, I guess it would condition the mind, but I guess since it all works together, it would reconfigure the whole mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just from a belief.
The mind, body, spirit, even though it has a separate function as our consciousness rises. In other words, as our consciousness rises, then it's more comprehensive. But the mind, body, spirit is one concept, even though it's three different concepts in three different tori. It functions as one concept.
Yeah, so any belief is going to reshape the
Affect the
mind,
whole
body,
thing.
spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is where illness or health is chosen.
So when someone has made that, that they're gonna have a neck injury and they've incorporated into their mind, body, and then they get awareness enough to realize that that's what they've done, then they have to just continue to focus on, pay attention to their thoughts and shift their thoughts or integrate whatever emotions come up or pick a different thought or...
All of the above, because what you're doing is essentially your tool to heal that is incremental with additional light and with additional faith and with additional surrender of the ego. Because that becomes part of the ego that we've changed, we've altered our mind, body, spirit, which is now supporting that ego position that I have an injury. Cancer is exactly the same way. Cancer principally is a result, regardless of the genetic tendency towards it, cancer is a result of anger. So if we store anger and we transform our mind, body, spirit to incorporate anger, we're essentially incorporating cancer. Significator of the spirit. This is the archetype that determines whether we are polarizing service to self or service to others. This is polled by the significator of the mind, by our biases and prejudices, with every thought. And this is both raw and raw. The subject and object are both love. So the only possibility for this archetype is love.
Love of self or
Hmm?
so love of whether we're radiating love.
That's our choice. This is really our only significant choice in every catalyst, in every moment of time, every thought, every experience that we have. This is what it comes down to. This is the purpose. That we choose whether we're going to radiate or absorb love energy. It is possible that we remain in low consciousness and are experiencing extremely low vibration energy as a result of our choices of emotions. It is possible that we will choose to radiate love energy. It is highly improbable, but it is possible because this is a thing unto itself. This determines the disposition of every thought. So with every thought, and we average 1,500 thoughts for every time dot, which is approximately 138 minutes. So the thought is either a positive or negative decision. The time dot, cumulatively, is either a positive or negative time dot. Those are simply added up, and if we are 51% of them, we've radiated love energy, then we have polarized service to others.
So is this box, this particular spirit
Archetype?
significator, is it consistent in all archetypes?
in all archetypes within our solar system. All archetypical minds within our solar system. Yeah,
Within our solar system, okay.
yeah.
Because everything else can be very different in the number of, the 22, all of that can be very varied, but you're always gonna have this because you're always going to have the choice of either radiating or absorbing.
Well, the archetypes used to design an archetypical mind are different. We
Right.
have 9 potential archetypes, which includes inherent characteristics and distortions in our octave.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that every archetypical mind has to incorporate every one of those archetypes.
I know, but is that one that does have to be incorporated? Is
No.
there any archetypes that do not have spirit significator?
Specifically, I don't know.
Because that would seem like if it's unto itself, and you're all, and every entity is making a choice in their spiritual evolution for radiance or absorption, you'd almost feel like that's kind of a core thing that's in every archetype.
Well, you would think, but I don't know that. Because there's an infinite number of archetypical minds.
Okay, are you done? I don't
Yeah.
wanna interrupt. From a practical standpoint, on trying to determine whether you're radiating or absorbing love energy, what if in a particular scenario you're just trying to be indifferent? You don't want to be angry, but you don't.
Doesn't work that way. You're either radiating or absorbing.
Right, but I guess what I'm asking is there a way to be aware what you're doing?
I don't think there's a way you can do that at our level of consciousness on an individual thought.
Okay.
You can
Time dot.
determine how you feel.
Okay.
If you're happier and you're happier doing things for other people, which is essentially the characteristic of love.
I mean, like if you're in a situation where it's someone you don't really want to be around, but you're trying to be indifferent and not.
You have compassion for their suffering. You don't want to be around them. You don't have to be around someone in order to radiate love. You don't have to like them to radiate love.
Okay.
But you do have to have compassion. You have to have understanding. You have to see them as another part of you that's just in a higher degree of chaos.
So even though they can be upsetting to you, you can still be radiating
Yes.
love.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's more difficult, but yeah, you can. And understand you're.
I mean, because yeah, I'm just thinking you can be in a situation like that where you don't want to absorb anything from them.
You're not absorbing anything from them.
Right.
You are radiating or absorbing your love energy. You're keeping it for yourself.
And
But you express
I
compassion for them. If you
Okay.
feel compassion, you don't have to say, hey, I feel compassionate for you. But if you feel compassion for their suffering, for their chaos, then you're still radiating love energy. It's yours. It's not a matter of
Okay.
requiring to get
so
their
it's not
love
like you're
energy.
sucking them dry. Okay.
That's a different process.
And
That is what happens when your consciousness is very low and you consciously are choosing service to self, then yes, you are absorbing their intelligent infinity intentionally. You're manipulating the situation so that you can
Okay, if you're,
dominate them.
but if you're trying to protect yourself, I guess that's absorbing.
No, Don, no, it's not. It's not that simple.
Okay.
You're explaining what you're describing is a condition of chaos within you. So it is most likely in that scenario that you are going to be radiating and absorbing in a vacillating manner.
Okay. That
Okay.
makes sense too.
Your objective in your spiritual growth is to surpass that point, to get to the point where you are surrendering your ego and recognize in that other person that they are a part of you, and offer them the radiance of your love through compassion.
Okay.
And so it's not a matter of you liking them or not liking them. You don't have, you're making that decision based upon the role that you're playing as opposed to your mind, body, spirit that is outside of the role that you're playing.
Okay.
You are an observer of the scene as opposed to being in chaos, being lost in the experience. While you're lost in the experience, it is most likely that you will be vacillating between radiance and absorption.
Okay.
That's why the benchmark for polarizing service to self is only 51%. Because at the level of consciousness and third density that we experience, it is difficult for most people to assume the posture or the awareness level of an observer and understand that they can offer objectively that radiance without being literally a participant in the scene.
Okay.
Make sense?
Mostly.
Okay. So after this point, whatever the fruit of that thought is added back to the mind, body, spirit. The mind, body, spirit is modified accordingly, and then attracts the next thought. We good? Any questions? Okay.
I may be done with my question.
Okay. If you have more, that's fine. Well, I thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have transformation and great way to do next, and we'll be through with the archetype.
Wow.
And then we'll start again. No, I was kidding.
Wow.
Maybe to absorb it all.
Yeah.